some of the reparations things you were saying, because you threw up some questions about reparations, about who's on the hook. You made the claim about the how many 3,700 black slave owners? That what you said?
Yeah, there are 3,700 free blacks
Free black,
that owned, black slaves.
right? Okay, now
In the Western society,
sorry.
pretty much put an end to the slave trade.
Oh no, 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 no. So we don't do that. You don't rape people and then give yourself credit for pulling your penis back out. That's the same thing. You can't create a system and then pat yourself on the back for the system stopping,
But
because
this system
because
has been around of slave. The system is,
no, 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 because then the damage is done already. You dig? You don't burn up a house and then put the fire out and say, "Hey, look, I stopped the fire." Now the house is burned down and charred, and the house is damaged now. So you can't start a fire and then pat yourself on the back for putting out the fire when you didn't rectify the damage of the fire, sir. And this is where we are. This is where the reparations come in. You're not going to pat yourself on the back talking about you stopped slavery unless you repair the people you damaged with slavery. That's what the reparations is about, sir. That makes sense?
well, no, because you're saying I can't pat myself on the back.
Right.
I didn't enslave anybody,
Sir,
and you.
sir, do you pay taxes? I do.
Unfortunately, yeah, I pay
Right.
a shit ton of bullshit taxes. Yeah,
Yes, and our tax dollars go to Native American tribes. I didn't push them off those Indian lands in certain places. Neither did you. But our tax dollars today go to fund and compensate them, sir.
and how much good does that do for them?
I don't give a damn. It does good enough because they are good where they are. It
They
does good enough. They're doing great in many of these Indian reservations, and they're
it's a
not complaining.
it's a very hierarchical community
Some would
Don't
say
where
a turtle
matter.
only the
Do you
top
know what
where
that
only the
means?
top
It's powerful.
Matter.
people
But
They're
what
are
doing,
is
making money.
a powwow?
Uh,
sir. I've
the
been
ma-
over there to some of them
They're
reservations. They
social
got their own
gatherings where everyone's
schools,
invited to
their own
dance,
police
sing, and
agencies, their own
celebrate indigenous
hospitals,
culture.
their own
There are
land.
two
They
types
are
of
good,
powwows,
sir.
traditional
They
and
are doing
competition.
real good.
Traditional
They're doing good
powwows are
enough.
usually
I want
smaller.
to do
They
good
have
like that
teachings,
too with
ceremonies,
our
and a feast.
reparations package. Now
can
back
you
to
give me an example
People
of
from
where
all over the
government
country take part in
subsidies or
competition
handouts have
battles.
benefited
Top cash
anyone?
prizes are given
white
to the best
supremacists,
dancer.
your community, sir. The white supremacists in
Oh
your
no, that's not fair. Come on, don't
what do
push
you mean
white
it's not
supremacy
fair?
off on me.
What do you mean it's not fair? You guys got the Homestead Act. That was a government handout.
When when you
The
say
Homestead.
you guys, do you not understand how racist that is
No,
to put me into a group of all white people or white supremacists?
you're part of the white community.
Dude, you don't know what I am.
Oh, dude, you're clearly white.
I
Don't do the denial of white. Dude, you better not say you better not.
I'm a I'm
You
I'm a
don't you
I'm a
say you
mutt.
Cherokee. Don't you say you Cherokee. Don't you do it.
Actually,
Don't you
I'm a mutt.
oh
I'm a mutt. Uh,
oh God. What you supposed to be mixed with? Let's hear it. Just say the shit. What are you supposed to be mixed
I have 11% Iberian Peninsula, 40% Irish, 30% English, and two types of Native American:
with?
Tuscarora, New York Native American,
Oh
and
God.
North Carolina Cherokee.
Oh, I knew you were going. God damn it. God. I,
I Yeah. So look. I
God,
mean,
I gonna
but
say, Lord,
I'm
five.
I'm a white guy, right?
Yo, thank you. Just say that, man. You're
I'm
five.
I'm I'm, I'm a white guy, but look here's what I wanted to say, and I want to hear what other people have to say about this.
Yeah, but
We
hold
we
on,
are
but
we,
no, I'm gonna make my point because you guys, you as a white person in your community, the white community, receive handouts from the government all the time. You've
Would
always received
finally gain the full
handouts.
benefits of
The
whiteness
Homestead
came with
Act
an
was a
innovation in
handout. The
housing
GI Bill was a
at the end
handout.
of World
When
War II.
welfare was created, that was for white people. All types of set aside programs. Preferential housing was a handout. These
It was
all
a
white
time when
suburbs that
hundreds of
denied
thousands
black
of
people
GIs came
access,
home
that was a
ready to start
handout to you.
families, but
Preferential
had no
treatment
place
at
to live.
jobs, prioritized employment, that was a handout.
A
These
living
all white
space
unions
was
that
at
were
a premium.
designed to keep black
In the
people
Bronx,
out
they
of them,
tried
that
building
was a
Quonset huts
handout. Yep.
and they turned
A
to
leg up in
slums. All the
preferential treatment
Quonset
for
huts
jobs,
just
housing,
disintegrated. There were two
all other
families
types of
sharing a
resources,
hut,
sir.
one family at
And you
one end, one
guys do
family at
pretty
the other,
well,
and before
right?
you know it, they were awful.
I don't know, man. I've drove across the country here this past week, and through the reservations, I saw squalor.
Veterans needed hope.
West
No,
Virginia,
They
you have
turned
white
to a
folks that
revolutionary New
more
Deal
white
housing
folks that are
program.
impoverished
It would
I know this.
revitalize
to a higher
housing with
percentage
an
than the
opportunity
black
for
I
community.
living
know
in
this.
ways
So,
Okay,
few
so
could have
why is it
you're in
bad for
West,
imagined.
color? Look,
you're
look.
in West Virginia, right?
What's that?
Are you in Virginia or West Virginia? What part of
I'm
Virginia?
actually no, I'm in Southern California. I was born and raised in Virginia Beach, Virginia.
Oh,
A huge melting pot of all sorts and types. It's the largest military base on the East Coast. We have rich people, poor people, black, white, all sorts and types. It's a big military town.
oh, right. That doesn't change the fact that just because some of these people within your community kind of squandered the benefits that were given to them, that doesn't mean that the benefits were not given to them. Over there in West Virginia, you got a bunch of hillbillies out there in the Virginias, man. You got a bunch of
Oh yeah.
yeah, you got some straight up and down hillbillies, and man, there's been legends about those Appalachian mountain cannibals, crazy ass white hanging around.
Incestuous, the most
Right,
incestuous people you will ever find.
exactly. And they make horror movies about the people from West Virginia, dude. I already
But
know.
it makes them goddamn good moonshine.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. And crazy as shit, and they'll eat you, but they do what they do as far as the liquor is
If
concerned.
these terms
But
sound
That's
these
only
are
if you walk on the wrong
they're,
person's
and
property.
these are the
because this
main
is
white
essentially the
supremacists.
same
And they
financing
be crazy
scheme
as
that
cat shit,
allows
can't
most
rub two nickels
Americans to own
together,
their
and
homes today.
running around with Confederate flags all over the
Federal
place. They'll be the
programs
But
and
most
you know what,
grants,
Tariq? Like I
billions
grew
into the
up and
home
I was
construction
bussed by
industry.
two other
Their message
elementary
to
schools where I
veterans:
ended up being
you
two of
can
15
afford a new
whites in an
home.
entire black
Buy a
elementary
new
school.
home
Got in
now.
fights every day, got called cracker and white boy and all this stuff. And
Mhm.
thankfully I had a twin brother, and
On
we
the
had each other's
outskirts
backs, and
of
we stood up for
Baltimore,
ourselves, and we ended up
Memphis,
getting respect,
Chicago,
right? But
Los
we got
Angeles,
kicked out of that
Denver, and
Norfolk
other
school system
cities,
because they said we were
rapid
the ones starting
communities sprang
fights, which
up.
was completely not the case. So I grew up with racism, but
One of the
racism
most
pointed at
famous
me
was a
from the
Long
black
Island
community
potato field,
as I grew
paid
up,
for
and I
in
ended up going to 14
17,000
different
new
schools
homes.
growing up. Um,
It was called
so I had to learn
11
how to make
Valley.
friends and stuff. And what I
Tax
realized
dollars
of
helped
all the
build a
schools I
single
went to and all the
family
people I
home
met
and mass
was that
produced consumer items.
this group identity politics,
The American dream
you
had a
know,
new name:
it's there, it exists, but it
suburban
doesn't serve us. It doesn't do anybody any good because we're all spiritual beings experiencing this human existence, which is a great thing.
God, dude, and we're spiritual beings, but you guys use the church to promote white supremacy more than anything, sir. The church, that's the most segregated place in America. Let's be real. There's a black church and then there's the white church, and that's because there's white supremacy. And the black kids you got into, that ain't racism. Y'all just were having it out, and whatever you guys were doing, y'all rubbed each other the wrong way. There was no systematic racism. There was no institution that was causing anybody to harm you. You were having physical fights like kids do in school. I've had fights in school. All kids fight in school. There's not no systematic racism, and kids get called names. That's not systematic. See, the systematic thing comes in when black people go to white schools, we get in fights and we get harmed and we get bullied, and the white school system sits there and protects the white kids who do it. Nobody was protecting the black kids because we don't have control over those institutions in the public sector. So let's be very clear. And a lot of times, the only time you guys will acknowledge racism is if you can accuse a black person of being, you dig, but you ignore all the systematic white supremacy that we see day in and day out. So that's a problem.
Yeah, no, I hear you and I understand what you're saying. I just disagree with some of the premises, and like I said, like all I know is like when I was growing up, there was definitely a lot of racism that I saw from white people and from black people. And as I grew up, I'm now 49 years old, but as I grew up, like things got a lot better over the years. But for the last 12 to 15
Eugene
years,
Burnett came
there's
home
been a
with
decline in
almost
the
a
race
million other
relations
black
that I'm
GIs.
very concerned
They had
about, and I
fought for the
think
country
it's
in
being
segregated
propagated by
ranks.
the government
They
to divide
returned
us.
hoping for
Well,
equality
we're already
and the
divided,
American
man.
dream.
That's the thing. We
For many,
but it's gotten
that
worse.
dream was a new home
When
for
has it
little
been
money
better? It
down
wasn't better in
and
the
some of the
70s.
easiest
What
credit
year was
terms
it
in
better? We've
history.
always
I'm saying
Went
from
up
the
to
mid
the
'80s to
salesman.
the
You were
early
interested
2000s,
in
dude.
your
like
home,
things
interested in
were
buying one, and what is the
pretty good.
procedure? Is there an
How so?
application to be
Where
filled
were
out?
things pretty good, sir?
So forth.
Well,
So he
I just noticed that I
looked
could
at
like
me,
go in certain parts of
looked
the
around, and he said to
Hampton
me, he
Roads
says,
area,
listen, it's not
and
me,
people were cool with
but
each
the
other,
owners
white,
of
black,
this
or whatever.
apartment
It didn't really
have
matter. I
not
mean, there's
as
still
yet
some
decided
people
to
that were
sell
bigoted
these
No,
and
no,
homes
no, no,
to
racist, but
no,
us.
it got better.
no, 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 no.
It
You could
was
always go
as
into
though it
black
wasn't real.
neighborhoods.
You
There's never
can't
been a time that a
imagine.
white person couldn't go into a
But for
black
someone to
neighborhood,
come
sir. What are you
out
talking
and
about?
actually tell
White
you
people can
that
go to any black
they
neighborhood they
can't
want
sell
to,
to you,
and they've
like
always
I was
could. They've
really
always
on a,
gone to
oh
black
man,
neighborhoods,
look at this house. Can
slumming
you
all
imagine
the
having
time.
this?
White people
And then
go.
for them to tell me
I have a
because of the
business in
color of
South
my
Central
skin,
LA.
I
White
can't
people
be
are
a
all
part of
over
it.
South Central LA. Nobody does anything to you in these black neighborhoods.
The
When we go in
FHA
your neighborhoods, that's the
underwriters
problem, though.
warned that the presence of even one
When a
or
Tamir
two
Rice
non-white
or when
families could
um,
undermine real estate values
another
in the
black
new
person wanders
suburbs.
off into one of your neighborhoods, that's when the problems
These
start.
government
You see,
guidelines were
great
widely
major
adopted by
difference.
private
Okay,
But
industry.
hard when the
here's what I'm seeing. Okay, you're from the West Coast, right? You live in the
Race
West
had
Coast. You're
long
in
played a
LA.
role in
uh-huh.
local real
I grew up on
estate
the East Coast. You're
practices.
not from my area, and over there, it's a big melting pot. It's a
Starting in the
lot different.
1930s,
I grew up in Section 8
government
housing. I
officials
worked in Section 8
institutionalized
housing.
the
I used
national
to smoke the
appraisal
shitty ass
system,
Mexican weed
where
with the
race was as
brothers.
much a
We all
factor
hung
in
out and
real
stuff.
estate assessment
And there,
as the
like I said, it's
condition of
just
the
Wasn't a
property.
melting
East Coast.
so
East Coast.
you were the white
Using
boy
this
who hung out
scheme,
with brothers.
federal
That's not a melting
investigators
pot, sir.
evaluated
That is not,
239
you were just the
cities
white boy
across the
who hung out
country
with the
for
brothers to
financial risk.
slum. Notice every time you talk
So
about
those
this is an
communities that were
example of what
all
I'm saying.
white,
You
suburban,
said
and
every
far
time you
away
mention you hung out with
from
black people,
minority
you
areas,
doing some
they
ratchet
received the
slum shit.
highest rating,
I
and that
shot
was the
dice with
color
the
green.
brothers. I smoked some fucking weed with the
Those
brothers, dude.
communities that were all
Everything
minority
is
or in the process
lowbrow.
of changing,
The black community
they
isn't
got the
about
lowest rating,
dice
That
and
was the lifestyle. That was the
and the color
lifestyle
no,
red.
that
that
they
that's
were
the point.
encompassed
They were
in that I
You were
took
redlined.
part in.
no.
As a
Everything
consequence,
you
Muslim
associate with
mortgages
blackness has
led to
something to do with
suburbanizing America, and it
gutter
suburbanized it
lifestyle.
racially.
You understand what I'm saying? You were just
The
slumming with
racial logic
some lower
drops the
level black
principle
people.
that
You dig?
an integrated
So that's
neighborhood
not a melting pot.
is a bad
That's just
risk,
a
is a
white boy
financial risk,
slumming.
that an integrated
When you guys want
neighborhood
to
is likely
slum
to
and
be
do
an
something
unstable
degenerate,
neighborhood.
yeah, you find
Unstable
some other
socially, but
degenerate black
therefore
people to
also
do it
unstable
with, and then
economically.
call that a melting pot. That's not a melting pot, sir.
When the
That's
white
just
residents
slumming.
of 8 Mile
And
Road in
we've
Detroit
never lived in
were
a
told
melting
they were
pot.
too close to a
The
I've
black
lived in
melting
neighborhood
pot
to
in Hampton.
qualify for a positive.
in the damn military. It's ridiculous, sir. They are ousting these white supremacists. Well, they're ousting themselves, outing themselves rather. They're not getting ousted, they're just outing themselves. We see them all the time. The military is full of white supremacists, sir. I mean, let's be real. But anyway,
That's
sir.
verifiably untrue. I mean,
How so?
the military is the most unracialized organization. Um,
Really?
yeah, because when you're at arms with a brother, I mean, with a brother in arms that's got your back and you got their back, and you guys are fighting, like that's the shit. That's camaraderie. That's like brotherhood. You guys are
Then
tight. You guys
did
look
they,
out for each other.
sir, then why did they have all black battalions and all black platoons then?
Hey man, if you want to keep looking backwards, let's talk about the Bible for a second.
Oh God.
Who's well, no, hold on, hear me out. Don't cut me off. Let me say something.
Uh,
There's 140 some odd women mentioned in the Bible. Who's the one?
they changed when they miss a point, boy, they'll change the subject so fast. Did he say the military was the most unracist place ever? Are you kidding me? Dude. Boy, the military is one of the US Army and the US military is so goddamn racist. They've been dude, in World War II, my family fought in World War II, dude. Where they would get Nazi soldiers and the white US troops would bring the Nazi soldiers, the captured soldiers, to eat with them while the black people had to eat somewhere else. The black US soldiers had to eat somewhere else. And US soldiers sat here eating with the enemy. Dude, are we really gonna go there? Brother, dude. Okay, just don't say weird stuff, dude. That can be easily debunked, man. Come on.
I'm
Good.
confused. Are we talking about today or are
Oh,
we
oh,
talking about
sir.
30, 40, 50 years ago?
Okay. This, sir, the remnants and the spirit of that stuff still lingers on, and you still.
It's ancestral, it's institutionalized.
Okay.
Yeah, I
exposed
mean,
to was
I
largely
hear you.
public
And look, I
housing.
appreciate you letting me
And
talk.
public
And
Okay.
housing,
look,
first of all, was
I
built
love the
almost
space, and
exclusively,
I want to learn from it. And
with a few
I hope you
exceptions,
take
in the
what I
central
have to
city.
say with the love and kindness that it was intended. And I appreciate
And
all. I
after
appreciate all you.
World War II, we
Thank you
started
so
building
much, man.
these
Thank you.
larger
Yeah,
and
thank you
larger
too.
public housing projects, which are called
Boy,
vertical
boy,
ghettos.
boy, boy. These guys, boy, the denial. Boy, the
All of a sudden,
denial,
you're
the denial.
concentrating large
And
numbers
now
of poor
I'm
people of
doing
color
this. I
in
let it
one
go on to
place.
show you how to deal with certain people, certain suspected white
Another
supremacists, how to
federal
deal with them.
program, urban renewal, was supposed to make cities more livable. 90% of all housing destroyed by urban renewal was not replaced. 2/3 of those displaced were Black or Latino.
Fair housing for all human beings who live in this country is now a part of the American way of life.
In 1968, President Johnson signed the Fair Housing Act. For the first time, racial language was removed from federal housing policy. Non-white families began moving into traditionally white communities in numbers.
We lived in an apartment, a two-family house in Queens, and when we came here, it was the first time we had bought a house, and I was looking for everything in the storybooks.
The Frisbees moved from Queens to suburban Roosevelt, only a few miles from Levittown. Like the Frisbees, many non-white families would discover the economic value of race in the real estate market. They watched as their homes and neighborhoods in suburbia declined precisely because they had moved into them.
When I moved into a neighborhood, I thought it would stay intact the way it was. On the street that I moved on when I moved there, it was predominantly white. Within 2 years, it was predominantly Black.
It was called blockbusting. Real estate agents preyed on the racial fears of white homeowners to get them to sell their homes quickly for less than market value. The homes were resold to non-whites at inflated prices.
Well, they would say, you know, we're having Black people move in. Now, I will give you cash if you want to sell me your house. Do you want to stay with Black people next door to you? And that's the way it went on. And as Bunny said, a lot of the people just said, yes, I'll take the money and run. And that's the start of the white people leaving.
As more Black and Latino families moved to Roosevelt, real estate became more and more depressed, just as the FHA had predicted. But why?
I have an idea my house is probably worth around 120 in this town. But what it would be worth in Wantor, Garden City, or some other place, probably around 200,000 or better. Now you're talking about 80,000. You said to me one time about why do people dislike the Blacks? Well, money-wise, there's a reason. Not that you dislike the Blacks so much, but you dislike what happens when a community turns from white to Black.
It wasn't African Americans moving in that caused housing values to go down in Roosevelt and other neighborhoods. It was whites leaving.
When a neighborhood, a previously white neighborhood, starts to integrate, even if individual whites don't have personal or psychological animosity or racial hatred, they still have an economic incentive to leave because they recognize that others might make the same calculation and leave first. So you get a vicious circle where whites calculate that other whites are going to sell when a neighborhood integrates, therefore they want to sell first to avoid losses, and they actually make it happen. They make white flight happen.
And if you think about African Americans, if African Americans are 20% of that market, it means that 80% of the people are not looking in those places for homes. So the prices of those homes declines or stays stable. And banks contribute to this by continually making loans in regions that are on the rise, white communities, and making it difficult to get loans in black communities.
So there's a difference. There's a lack of symmetry that's important to keep in mind. So it's not the same when whites are all by themselves, because when they're all by themselves, they're taking all the resources with them. They're taking all the amenities with them. But when blacks are by themselves, they can't get loans. They don't have a decent tax base. There are no jobs, and then that becomes associated with black space.
In the end, what happened to Roosevelt happens in many neighborhoods when white families and businesses flee. The tax base eroded. Schools and services declined. The town was seen by county officials as a legitimate dumping ground for welfare families.
At one point, we had explicit laws that says whites are on top and blacks are on the bottom. Today, we have many of the same practices without the explicit language. And those practices are largely inscribed in geography. And so geography does the work of Jim Crow laws. So many people are confused as why after 50 years of civil rights are our schools still segregated? Why are our housing markets still segregated? Why are our jobs still segregated? And again, a lot of this is a function of how we've reinscribed the racial geographic space in the United States. That structure is still what we're living with today.
As homes in white communities appreciated in value, the net worth of these white families grew. For most non-white families who stayed in urban neighborhoods, the housing market open to them in the 50s and 60s was largely a rental market. You don't gain equity by paying rent.
Where one's family lives in America is not just a matter of taste and preference. You have the issue of housing and wealth. The majority of Americans hold most of their wealth in the form of home equity. So that's their nest egg. That's how they can finance the education of their offspring. That's how they can sort of save up for retirement. It's their savings bank, right? They're living in their savings bank.
My family, like a lot of families, was in Detroit struggling to buy a house. You had a dual housing market, one white, one black. A housing market with one with a lot of demand, another housing market with very little demand. My father lives in the house that I grew up in. That house today, 5-bedroom house, is worth about $20,000. That same house bought in the suburbs would be worth today about $320,000. So whites moving to the suburb were being subsidized in the accumulation of wealth, while blacks were being divested.
And these were public policy decisions in which, on one hand, people were given access to property, given title, and subsequently wealth, and on another hand, where people were not given access to property, did not generate wealth, and did not generate the kind of opportunity for the next generation.
So if you can get a government loan and with your GI Bill, your newly earned college degree, and buy a house in an all-white area that then appreciates in value, that then you can pass on to your children, then you're passing on wealth that has all been made more available to you as a consequence of racist policies and practices. To the child of that parent, it looks like my father worked hard, bought a house, passed his wealth on to me, made it possible for me to go to school, mortgage that house so I could have, you know, a relatively debt-free college experience and finance my college education. How come your father didn't do that? You know, well, there's some good reasons why maybe your father had a harder time doing it if you're African American or Latino or Native American.
And the thing that's really slick about whiteness, if you will, is that most of the benefits can be obtained without ever doing anything personally. For whites, they're getting the spoils of a racist system, even if they're not personally racist.
To glimpse one of the far-reaching consequences of racial inequality, you need only consider one statistic: comparative net worth or wealth. If you add up everything you own and subtract all your debts, what's left is your net worth.
Today, the average black family has only 1/8 the net worth or assets of the average white family. That difference has seemingly grown since the 1960s, since the civil rights triumphs, and is not explained by other factors like education, earnings rates, savings rates. It is really the legacy of racial inequality from generations past. No other measure captures the legacy, the sort of cumulative disadvantage of race, or cumulative advantage of race for whites than net worth or wealth.
Even with the same income, white families have on average twice the wealth of black families. Much of that difference lies in the value of their homes. But what happens when we compare families along the color line who have similar wealth?
When you make the right comparison, when you compare a black kid from a family with the same income and wealth level as the white kid from the similar economic situation, rates of college graduation are the same. Rates of employment and work hours are the same. Rates of welfare usage are the same. So when we're talking about race in terms of a cultural accounting of these differences or a genetic accounting of these differences, we're really missing the picture because we're making the wrong comparison.
We want to be a colorblind society that values the content of character over the color of skin. The hope of thousands of newcomers who arrive each year is that we already are.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic of which
I don't see color. I see people, the saying goes.
There are people from 100 other nations who look different from you. People whose religion, history, skin color, and reason for being here today may be different from yours.
But in post-civil rights America, is colorblindness the same as equality?
The notion of colorblindness came to us from that famous I Have a Dream speech of Dr. Martin Luther King, where he said that people should be judged by the content of their character and not by the color of the skin. And what has happened in the post-civil rights era is that whites have assumed that we're already there, that we're in a society where color does not matter.
At the very same time that America refused to give the Negro any land, through an act of Congress, our government was giving away millions of acres of land in the West and the Midwest, which meant that it was willing to undergird its white peasants from Europe with an economic floor. But not only did they give the land, they built land-grant colleges with government money to teach them how to farm. Not only that, they provided county agents to further their expertise in farming. Not only that, they provided low interest rates in order that they could mechanize their farms. Not only that, today many of these people are receiving millions of dollars in federal subsidies not to farm, and they are the very people telling the black man that he ought to lift himself by his own bootstraps. Now, this is what we are faced with, and this is the reality. Now, when we come to Washington in this campaign, we are coming to get our check. The Negro is still languished in the corners of American society and finds himself in exile in his own land. And so we've come here today to dramatize a shameful condition. In a sense, we've come to our nation's capital to cash a check. When the architects of our republic wrote the magnificent words of the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence, they were signing a promissory note to which every American was to fall heir. This note was a promise that all men, yes, black men as well as white men, would be guaranteed the unalienable rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. It is obvious today that America has defaulted on this promissory note insofar as her citizens of color are concerned. Instead of honoring this sacred obligation, America has given the Negro people a bad check, a check which has come back marked insufficient funds. But we refuse to believe that the Bank of Justice is bankrupt. We refuse to believe that there are insufficient funds in the great vaults of opportunity of this nation. And so we've come to cash this check, a check that will give us upon demand the riches of freedom and the security of justice.